Hello everyone, my name is Ritik. Guys, I'm going to be your host for today's session. It's going to be interactive one, as I always like on a call always told you about it, and it's going to be about a deep understanding of the product management. Like most of the people, what they do is they run after the designation, and what exactly you need to work on is your own mindset. Start the session with a quick introduction about ourselves, what we exactly do.
Product management is the most exciting thing that has happened to me in my life. I plan to be a PM for the rest of my life, and I'd love to share my experiences or view on this field. So, instead of me starting out with a definition of product management, I kind of want us to think in another way. So, who makes a product? How does a product come out? Usually, you will have a developer who's actually doing the coding, or you'll have an engineer who's doing the industrial engineering, operating on some machines which actually get your product manufactured. These guys will probably be given designs by designers who could be graphics, UI, industrial, UX. Some of these designs could even come from any party inside the team, right? Then once stuff is manufactured, how do you know if it's good to send to market? You would run tests on this. That's why you have QA teams in place. They'll actually check if the product is satisfactory, it is doing what it is supposed to do, it's not breaking, it's of high quality. And once they give a green light, does the product actually go to market? You have to think very deeply about what the actual problem is. So there's a very, you can say, old bookish method which is called the five whys method. So if a user says, I want this feature, you can ask why. You can say, I want to comment on a video. You can ask why you want to comment on a video. Then the user might answer, because I want to share what I feel about that video. Then you could ask, why do you want to share about what you feel about this video? Finally, you might end up with the answer like, because I want to express my emotion. Then you can think, do we really need a comment feature? Or can we simply build something like a reaction feature? And then prioritize accordingly. Maybe you can even build both. But it's important to narrow down what the problem is before you start solutionizing. I don't have an exhaustive list, but I listed a bunch of skills over here, and you can see some of the ones that we just spoke about are on this list. Typically, product managers are of three types. Like, this list is not exhaustive, but these are the more common ones. You'll have growth PMs. They usually focus on certain metrics. So, for example, a growth PM could be focusing on driving more downloads. So, what they could do is they could run a lot of ad campaigns, get more users in. They could build some sharing mechanism inside the application. So, the users are sharing the app, and the product is then driving downloads, getting growth through the application. But the core is that they're focusing on some of these high level numbers. Technical PMs. Technical PMs have a deep insight in tech because they might have been an engineer before, or they come from a QA background or a computer science background. So they can kind of understand better than other PMs about what the tech is capable of and where it can break, or how fast it could be, how much better it could be, and also give insights onto how in the development phase things can be done. So they could possibly be designing the database schema or the various rows and columns which are there, what they should look like, what their function should be. So they drive deeper into the tech aspect. Generic PMs usually wear a lot of hats. They're responsible for acquisition, they're responsible for activation, they're responsible for a good user experience, they're responsible for overall solving user problems and the business problems. If you have a tech background, you could go in a technical PM role, you could even go in a generic role. Similarly, if you have more of an interest in growth, you could go in that. So this is something that not only depends on your own preference, but also what background you're coming from. So if you're not from a tech background, it would be harder for you to get into a technical PM role. But you could do a growth or generic PM role. Flexibility is available, Technical PMs would usually end up in a tech role, but they are also flexible enough to go in other roles. This is a wireframe. As you can see, there are no images, there's no color, it's very plain. Even the text is not entered properly. But this is how bare bones a wireframe is supposed to be. It's a designer who would usually pick this up and then add all the different elements to it. So he will swap this one, this banner with an ad. He can add actual thumbnails over here. He can have realistic content titles over here. He'll add colors to this and make it look more real. So that's called prototyping. We're not going to watch a video. I just want to show you on one of the features and what specking is actually. A simple specification could be, or a simple feature could be, I have a video player, but I want to give the user a ability to make the player full screen, which is it's going to cover my entire monitor. So then you will tell this to your designer. He'll be like, okay, we can put this border square icon at the corner of the player. Good. Then you can think that, okay, maybe when the user hovers their mouse over here, there should be this text called full screen which appears over there. So it's easy for users to understand what this button does. Similarly, if you look at when my mouse is hovering on this icon, there's a slight animation over there. Can you see that? This is a part of the spec as well. You will tell your team that whenever the user hovers their mouse here, there should be a small animation which happens, and there should be a caption on top which says full screen. Day-to-day analytics also PMs look at because you want to be deep in your data. You want to see if your performance is impacted or things are working as normal. If you have launched any new features, then what is the performance of that feature? So for example, if I launched the dislike button on Facebook as a Facebook product manager, then immediately after launching, I would like to know if the feature was successful. So I'm going to look at analytics and I'm going to see how many people clicked dislike button. And that's going to give me an angle of is the dislike button successful. So you will often see products that come out with features. Some of these features might get scrapped or they might not make it finally to the end users. That's because they didn't do well, they didn't have good reception, or the analytics was simply telling the raw data, which is the feature wasn't working. Lastly, user research. So I speak to users almost daily. I try to understand what kind of problems they're facing, how I can help them, and I sometimes even get some useful ideas out of them because they're using the product so much, they're into it, and they generate a idea bank for you. So that's a good insight that you can get from them. Similarly, you can schedule user interviews on a monthly basis, weekly basis, have them sit down on a video call and maybe have them screen share your application so you understand how they're using your application. Moving forward, I wanted to tell you guys what you could do after you became a PM. So these are some of the paths that product people take. They get promoted to a senior PM, they could become a product lead, they could become a assistant vice president product, they could become vice president product, they can become a chief product officer. Some product managers even become CEOs because as a product manager, you're working with business, tech, and design. So you have solid insights onto how your business is functioning. So I would argue that product managers would make amazing CEOs compared to different fields. I want to end this with one quotation. What makes a great product? So it's not building a product that solves user problems. It's building a product that solves user problems while serving the business. Because if you don't serve the business, who's going to pay you? Or how will you develop more features to keep your users on the platform? So you have to consider the business. It's the most important aspect. They'll be funding the salaries of your entire team, the infrastructure of the product, and so on and so forth. So always try to make that connection that you have to solve the user problem, but it has to serve the business. With that, I would like to end.